We're back in the tackle room, and today we're talking about something I see a lot of anglers doing, but it might just be the very worst presentation you can be throwing in the pre-spawn. Stick around, we're going to talk all about it.
Oh, I got him. That's another nice one.
And here is this video's featured comment. Congratulations! If you would like to have a chance to have your comment featured in an upcoming video, all you've got to do is leave a comment. And now, on with the video. Welcome back to Lowbrow Fishing, and there's light at the end of the tunnel. Winter is coming to an end. That means if the pre-spawn hasn't already kicked off in your area, it's about to very soon, which of course leads to some of the best fishing all year long, as those bass are feeding up in a frenzy in preparation for the spawn. And they're eating pretty much everything in sight. Crawfish, sunfish, shad, shiners, what have you. Now, we've talked about in past videos where we can find those bass. You know, they're up close near the bank as they're following those traditional migration routes into those traditional spawning pockets or flats or ditches or what have you. And we're looking along those migration routes for places that those bass are going to hold up for a while. Whether it's a rock pile, a laydown, a dock, a bluff wall, a riprap bank, or whatever. Now, the good thing about this migration is it happens in waves. So a lot of these places will repopulate. Catch a few bass off of that brush pile, come back later, catch a few more. It's great to fish in the pre-spawn. Now, we've talked about some of the presentations that I like to use for covering the bottom of the water column, the middle of the water column, and even the top of the water column, throwing top water, you know. Now, it might be a little early for top water in your area, but still, I wouldn't shy away from it. But that does lead me to some techniques that bass anglers are using that are actually more harm than good. Now, nothing in bass fishing is 100% certain. So even if you're using a bad technique, chances are you might still catch a bass here and there. But you're not going to maximize your efficiency. You're not going to be maximizing your time on the water. You know, it's already hard enough as that lake is filling up with anglers, whether from the boat or whether from the bank. Right now is probably going to be the most crowded time of the year for bass fishing because everybody wants to fish in the pre-spawn because it's so easy and you're going to catch lots of really nice bass, if not your PB. This is the time of year that we all look forward to simply because of that fact. The big girls are out and we want to catch them. So what are we doing that works and what are we doing that doesn't work? Well, I kind of wanted to focus on the thing that really doesn't work that I'm seeing a lot of anglers doing. As we talk about those bass on those migration routes, we've already said it. Most of the time, they're going to be in that zone 3 area, which on any fishery, it doesn't matter if you're fishing in Florida, if you're fishing in South Mississippi or Texas or Georgia or Tennessee or wherever, they're all going to be pretty close to the bank. Now, the depth may be relative. If you're fishing a mountain lake, it still might be 10 or 15 feet deep. But here, you're looking at from a couple of feet to mere inches of water. And obviously, that's going to lend itself to some presentations over others. And there's one presentation in particular that I see a lot of anglers using, even out on the lake today. I was fishing at the big lake today before a storm front rolled in, and there were 2 anglers that were near me in really nice boats, and they were using this technique, and I don't think I saw them catch a single fish. Now, don't get me wrong, okay? If you're out there and you're having fun and you're fishing the way that you want to fish, that's fine. I'm not trying to change that. Do what you want to do. If you're enjoying yourself, If you're out there having a great time, I'm not trying to change that. However, if you're trying to catch the most fish that you can, or any fish at all, then this video is something you definitely want to listen to. Now, what were these guys using? What were these anglers using? And how can we correct what they were doing to tweak it just a little bit to make it more productive? Well, this was the type of lure that they were throwing, and that's a deep diving crankbait. You don't want to be throwing a deep diving crankbait right now, especially in the pre-spawn. Those bass are shallow. This is not a shallow bait. This is a bait made specifically for deep water. Now, I know a lot of anglers who love throwing a deep diving crank like this Berkley Digger. This thing gets down to about 15 or 16 feet, so it gets down pretty good. This is about the deepest lure that I need on the big lake. I don't really need anything that will go much deeper than that, simply because the big lake's not that deep. And this bill here, you can see this bill's pretty chewed up from me grinding it along the bottom in the deep spots anyway. And that's essentially how you want to work a deep diving crank, isn't it? You want to get it down there, and if you can grind that bill into some stuff, get it to bounce off of some rocks, get it to deflect off of some timber, and work it that way, well, a lot of times that deflection will lead to bites in the summertime. This, for me, is a summer bait. This is something I'm using after the spawn, in the post-spawn, and even into summer as those bass pull back out into the main part of the lake and they've hit that deeper water. They're in the submerged creek channels. They're in the deep drop-offs just off of ledges. That's where I'm using this. I'm not using this in the pre-spawn because, quite honestly, this is probably not going to do me a lot of good. As I said, you might be able to catch some fish with this, but they're probably going to be few and far between. And I know what a lot of you are saying. You're saying, Lowbrow, I don't want to fish those slow bottom bouncing techniques like you do. I don't like fishing worms. I don't like fishing jigs. I don't like fishing weightless flukes. That's boring. I don't like fishing that way. And that's fine. You know, not everybody has to fish the same way. And if we all fish the same way, what fun would that be? So it's okay to be different. Different is good. I'm perfectly okay with different. So let's look at some techniques along those same lines, just to modify it just a bit. So therefore, you can keep that crankbait in your hand. You can keep covering water. You can keep working how you want to work, but maybe catch a few more fish in the process. Now, what am I starting with? Well, I'm going to start with something like this Hybrid Hunter. Now, a lot of you guys that have watched this channel for a long time know that this lure and I have a history. I went for a long time not really caring for these because the vegetation in my lake is so super thick that this right here, that cup on that bill ended up getting more gummed up. But I kept working with it. I kept practicing with it until I figured out how to fish it, how I needed to work it for it to do its job. When I did that, this is a very proven and reliable bait. Now, I've got this in this red color. And the thing I like about this red, this particular red, is it's got a little bit of that brown and orange on the bottom. So from underneath, it's not going to be so garish, because right now I'm not a huge fan of throwing bright red. I do that more in the post-spawn when those craw are actually molting. But right now, something like this can work just fine. I can burn this pretty shallow. I can burn this in a couple of feet of water and get away with it. And I can work to cover water with this in those more grassy areas. So something like this Strike King Hybrid Hunter might be just the ticket, might be exactly what you're looking for. Now, again, a square bill, a small 2.5 size square bill, burning that along those banks, near brush piles, along riprap. You know, and this is another one you may want to get digging in that bottom, or you may actually want to stay a little bit higher. You may want to crank it, let it stop, float up a little bit, crank it, let it stop, float up a little bit. Those are great ways to work this particular bait. You know, you don't have to have a worm, a wacky worm, a Texas worm, or anything like that. You don't have to use a jig or a weightless fluke. Something like this Berkley Pitbull, this is the smaller size. This gets down to about 7 or 8 feet still, so I'm still going to be grinding it in that bottom along those 45-degree banks, but that's fine. That's how I prefer to fish something like this. And this is in that peanut butter and jelly color, right? It's got that brown kind of green in there, and it's got this purple that goes along with it. This, for me, right now, this time of year, this is going to be the money color whenever I'm fishing a crankbait. But something like that square bill. Now, another type of square bill that I want to fish is a silent running one, right? Like this Strike King KVD. This is a 2.5. This is going to be something that I'm working in that 3 to 5 foot depth. And I like the sexy shad color because, well, those bass are feeding on shad and shiner right now. It gives me something that I can go through those shad clouds, go through those bait clouds. And a lot of times I will have small bait fish following this because they have that schooling instinct. I work it for a few cranks, let it stop and rise up. And I alter the speed at which I'm going with it. And something like this on a pressured body of water, it can really be the ticket because that's silent, just no rattles. On a pressured body of water, this is going to be something that you're more going to want because noisier baits, from my experience, well, the bass get conditioned to those types of baits. And they generally begin to shy away from them because they know, well, they've heard them over and over and over again. They know that those types of baits aren't necessarily food. So it becomes even harder to get a reaction strike. You can get it right in front of their face, and a lot of times they'll completely ignore it. So this on a pressured body of water or even on an unpressured body of water. So a silent running square bill, such as this KVD from Strike King, can be exactly what the doctor ordered. Now, if you're more of a fan of a tight wiggle, well, something like this Berkley Fritz side, right? It's that very thin body. It's got that super thin body, which means it's not going to have a wide wiggle like a traditional square bill. And this coffin bill, I like the way this coffin bill is over the flat bill that they have with the Fritz side, because this to me seems like it gives it a little bit more random hunting motion, especially when I'm deflecting off of something like a laydown or a rock pile. I'll get this right up in there and you can feel it. You'll snag it and it'll pop one way or the other. I really like the randomness of that. It's something like fishing a wiggle wart. Well, the thing about those old school pre-storm wiggle warts is the bills on them were janky, right? They were all crooked, and that was part of the mold. But the magic happened because of those, and they would go one way or the other. A pre-storm wiggle wart, if you've got one of those to fish in the pre-spawn, I'm telling you what, you are bringing fish to the boat and you're making other guys jealous. But in colder water, or again, more heavily pressured water, something like this Berkley Fritz side may be a great choice simply because of the fact it's got a tighter wobble and it doesn't have rattles. So using subtlety can also be to your advantage. And one of the favorite things that I like to do, obviously we've talked about it before, is a lipless crank. And this is just a Cotton Cordell Super Spot. And again, you guys have known this for now. This is the ones that I modify myself. I drill a hole, fill it full of super glue and baking soda to limit the rattles. It's not nearly as loud as it normally is. And again, this little shad color, this little, can be a shiner color, whatever, can be a great bait on a pressured water, or whenever you want to change of pace, something like that will work exceptionally well. A Strike King Red Eye Shad in that sexy shad color, that's another one. But I like this because of the body shape. This is more in line with that traditional rattle trap, the Bill Lewis rattle trap. And I like this because I can actually jerk it like a jerkbait, which is something in the pre-spawn, when I've got those clouds of bait fish, this will actually go through them. It'll, jerk around in it, and then I can give a few cranks, and then I can jerk it again. That's where I'm getting those huge strikes. And I'm thinking about doing a video just on demonstrating how I'm doing that and why it works so well. But in the pre-spawn, you got to have a lipless. If you're not going to be fishing bottom bouncing techniques, that doesn't mean you can't burn a crankbait. But I strongly suggest if you're using something like a deep diving crankbait, you modify that. Go with a square bill. Move a little bit closer to the bank. Try some different variations from that. And I'm telling you, your luck, your success rate will be much greatly improved. So there you have it. The one technique that I really wouldn't throw during the pre-spawn. While the pre-spawn can be very forgiving, you've got to stay where those bass are in order to get bit. And if you're working a deep diving crank that's way offshore, there's not going to be many bass in that area. So take that technique and modify it to where you can still cover water with your favorite types of crankbaits, but yet stay where those fish are. Thanks for watching Lowbrow Fishing. We'll catch you in the next one.